A human military officer named Jack Morrison discovers an injured alien warrior woman from an advanced species called the Vrani after her scout ship crashes on a remote human colony world. Despite orders to treat all Vrani as enemies during an ongoing interstellar war, Jack hides and heals her. The alien woman, named Kyra, slowly recovers while they communicate through gestures and broken attempts at each other's languages. As trust builds between them, Kyra reveals through drawings and images that her people were forced into this war by a third parasitic species that has infiltrated both human and Vrani leadership. Jack and Kyra fall deeply in love while uncovering this conspiracy together. When military forces from both sides converge on the colony, Jack must choose between his duty and protecting Kyra. In a heartbreaking finale, Kyra sacrifices herself to transmit proof of the parasitic infiltration to both fleets, saving billions of lives but leaving Jack alone with only memories of their brief but profound connection. The war ends, but Jack carries the weight of losing the one person who showed him that love transcends species and conflict. Complete story. Jack Morrison wiped the sweat from his forehead as he checked the perimeter sensors one more time that evening on the colony of New Haven. Everything seemed quiet under the twin moons that hung in the purple sky. He had been stationed on this remote outpost for 8 months now, far from the main battle lines of the war between humanity and the Vrani. Most days passed without incident, just him and a small crew maintaining the early warning systems that would alert Central Command if enemy ships approached. The alarm shrieked at exactly 2300 hours. Jack bolted upright from his bunk and ran to the command center, where the screen showed a small craft spiraling down through the atmosphere. The trajectory calculations confirmed it would impact about 3 kilometers from the base. He grabbed his rifle and emergency kit, then jumped into the all-terrain vehicle without waking the others. Something told him to go alone. The crash site was still smoking when he arrived. The ship was smaller than he expected, barely larger than a personal shuttle. Scorch marks covered the hull, and one wing had been completely sheared off. Jack approached carefully with his weapon raised. The canopy had cracked open, and he could see movement inside. What he found changed everything. The pilot was Vrani, but not like the propaganda images he had seen. She was badly injured with blue blood seeping from a gash across her shoulder. Her skin had a faint silvery sheen, and her eyes were larger than human eyes, colored like polished amber. She looked at him with an expression he recognized instantly as fear mixed with defiance. Her hand moved weakly toward a weapon, but she was too hurt to reach it. Jack lowered his rifle. Every regulation and every hour of training told him to report this immediately. The Vrani were the enemy. They had attacked human colonies. They had killed thousands. But looking at her struggling to breathe, all he saw was someone who needed help. He made a choice that would define the rest of his life. He carried her back to his vehicle and drove not to the base, but to an old mining shelter he had discovered during one of his surveys. The shelter had power and water, and most importantly, it was off the grid. He laid her on an old cot and used his medical supplies to clean and seal her wounds. She passed out from pain or exhaustion or both. Jack sat watching her breathe and wondered what he had just done. She woke 2 days later. Jack had been bringing food and water, checking her injuries, making sure the bleeding had stopped. When her eyes opened and focused on him, she tried to sit up quickly but gasped in pain. Jack raised his hands in what he hoped was a universal gesture of peace. He pointed to himself and said his name slowly. She watched him for a long moment, then pointed to herself and made a sound that he tried to repeat. After several attempts, she seemed satisfied. Kyra. Her name was Kyra. The next weeks became a strange dance of communication. Jack brought pictures and objects to teach words. Kyra did the same, drawing symbols in the dust and pointing to things around the shelter. She healed quickly, faster than a human would have. Her strength returned, and with it a grace in how she moved that reminded Jack of water flowing. Sometimes he caught her watching him with those amber eyes, and he wondered what she was thinking. One evening, Kyra pulled out a small device from her damaged flight suit. She activated it, and holographic images appeared in the air between them. Jack leaned forward as she began showing him things. The images depicted three species: humans, Vrani, and something else. The third species looked like insects merged with metal. Kyra pointed to the insect creatures and then made a gesture of something entering or infecting. She showed images of Vrani leaders with strange marks on their necks, then images of human leaders with the same marks. Jack felt his blood run cold as he understood. The war between humans and Vrani was not what it seemed. Both sides had been infiltrated by this parasitic species. They were being manipulated into destroying each other. Kyra showed him more images of the parasites feeding on the destruction, growing stronger as the two civilizations tore each other apart. She looked at him with desperate hope that he would believe her. He did believe her. Everything suddenly made sense. The strange orders from command. The way the war had escalated so quickly from first contact. The targets that seemed designed for maximum casualties rather than strategic value. Jack reached out and took Kyra's hand. It was the first time they had touched beyond medical necessity. Her skin was warm and smooth. She looked at their joined hands and then at his face. Something passed between them in that moment that went beyond language or species. They began working together to gather proof. Jack accessed classified files from the base using his security codes. Kyra repaired parts of her ship's communication system. They found patterns in the data, evidence of the parasitic infiltration at the highest levels of both governments. The more they uncovered, the more time they spent together, the closer they became. Jack found himself looking forward to returning to the shelter each day, not just for the mission, but to see her. The way she tilted her head when she was thinking. The sound she made that he realized was laughter. The way she would sometimes put her hand on his arm when she wanted his attention. One night after they had been working for hours, Kyra stood and walked to the shelter entrance. Jack followed and found her looking up at the stars. She pointed to a constellation and made sounds he now understood meant home. Then she turned to him and touched her chest over her heart, then touched his chest. Jack understood. She was telling him she cared for him. He took her face gently in his hands, searching her eyes for permission. She leaned into him, and they kissed under the alien stars. Her lips were softer than he expected, and she tasted like starlight and ozone. When they pulled apart, she made a sound in her language that he somehow knew meant the same, as when he whispered that he loved her. They had 6 more weeks together. 6 weeks of stolen moments between gathering evidence and planning how to expose the truth. 6 weeks of learning each other's bodies and hearts. 6 weeks of knowing it could not last. The transmission equipment was almost ready. They had compiled enough proof to convince both sides if they could just get the message out. But the window was closing. Both human and Vrani fleets were converging on this sector. Jack woke one morning to find Kyra already dressed in her repaired flight suit. She had tears in her eyes when she looked at him. She had finished the transmission device during the night. It was ready, but someone would need to stay with it to make sure the signal reached both fleets, to boost it and redirect it if they tried to jam it. The process would take at least an hour. Whoever stayed would not escape when the fleets arrived. Jack immediately said he would do it. Kyra shook her head and spoke in her language. Words he did not understand, but meaning he felt in his bones. She was telling him no. She would do it. Her people had started this by being infiltrated first. It was her responsibility. Jack argued, but she put her fingers gently on his lips. She pulled out a small crystal from her suit and pressed it into his hand. Through gestures and the words they had taught each other, she made him understand it was a memory crystal. It contained everything about her memories, her thoughts, her feelings. It was how Vrani preserved their essence. She wanted him to have it, to remember her, to know she had loved him. The fleets arrived 18 hours later. Jack had driven back to the base as Kyra instructed. He had wanted to stay, but she had made him promise to live, to make sure the truth was heard, to tell their story. He watched on the base scanners as the ships appeared in orbit. He saw the moment Kyra activated the transmission. Both fleets immediately began trying to jam it, but she had designed it brilliantly. It bounced and adapted and kept transmitting. The proof of the parasitic infiltration flooded every command center and every ship. The evidence was undeniable. He also watched as strike teams from both sides descended on her location. She had known they would come. The transmission needed protecting for 1 hour. She defended it for 73 minutes. Jack saw it all through the base sensors. When the teams finally broke through to the shelter, the transmission had completed. The truth was out. Both fleets immediately ceased fire as the revelation spread. Le